Welcome to another episode of Brainscratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today. We've got a bit of a special episode. A few weeks ago, we covered the case of Jonathan Paul Estes, and the private investigator that was working that case reached out to me. He's very passionate. He has a lot of information that he wants to put out there. He thinks it's going to do good. He thinks it could potentially help the case. And of course, that sounds like we're on the same page. So right now, let me introduce to you, this is James Michael. How you doing, James?
I'm doing fantastic. First of all, thank you for letting me come on this program and explain a little bit about what I may know or whatever help I may be able to give. I do want to apologize. I know I look like I'm the getting ready to be the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets tonight, but I assure you there's a reason for the getup that I have on, the jacket, the hat, and the headset. I'm not a big Skype guy, so you're teaching me as we go here, but I do appreciate what you do. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk, and I'm sorry for looking like I should be running the defense of the Jets.
No sweat, no sweat. We just appreciate your time and your expertise. And just to give everyone a real quick recap, I do have the original episode in the description box below, so you can watch that whole episode. I recommend you do that if you haven't seen that yet. Pause this one and watch that. But Jonathan Estes was last seen June 2nd, 2018 in Bogue Chitto. Am I saying that right?
The way I heard it was pronounced as Boca Chetta.
Oh, really? Boca Chetta. Okay.
Boca Chetta, yeah.
Gotcha. And he disappeared at the age of 36. We're talking brown hair, brown eyes, though in several photos he does shave his head, stands between 6 foot to 6'1", weighs between 150 to 175 pounds. On this new poster I found, they actually have a better description of his tattoo, and that's one of the questions we had, because we heard some people saying it was like a flaming eagle, other people are saying it's a cross. This description is cross with surrounding red and orange flames on his back. Do you know? Have you seen any photos of his tattoo?
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures of different tattoos. And what's interesting is 39% of the country right now has a tattoo. When it comes to missing persons, very, very rarely, and I've probably worked on maybe about 125 cases that involve missing persons, I've never looked for a tattoo. Yeah. And that stuff's all good, and it's great that people put that information out there. The more information, the better. But if you're asking me what tattoos partner he has, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, I understand that, especially for the time frame that you're working on the case. I think that information becomes more important, particularly if we're talking about an unidentified body being found somewhere. It could
Definitely
be an identifying mark to help tie that together. So who originally hired you to work on Jonathan's disappearance?
Well, first of all, the name of my business and my practice is Gulf Coast Investigations. I'm based out of Biloxi, Mississippi, but I am one of the few private investigators in the state of Mississippi, and there is not many of us, like any other state, that is actually licensed and went to college to become a private investigator from the state of Florida. Real quick, for anybody who doesn't know private investigating around the United States of America, there is only 3 states right now that do not have technically licensed fingerprinted background check private investigators. One of them is Mississippi. There used to be 5. Alabama was one. I believe Wyoming, Hawaii. There was 5 states now. There's only 3. There is no governing body in the state of Mississippi to allow a person to be a private investigator. If you go ahead and you pay $25, you get a fictitious name, and you register with the state of Mississippi, you have a licensed private investigating business. You get a business card. In the state of Florida, where I originally started, you need to go to a community college, to a college. You need to take a course. Once you pass the course in 2 exams, you have to work under somebody for 2 years, an apprenticeship, unless you have a legitimate long-term law enforcement or military background, which I do not have. I have a pro football background. I'm more of a recovery guy than I am somebody that goes and looks at insurance claims or bodyguard work. So I actually got my education at Hillsborough Community College in the Tampa Bay area. Now, I went to regular college. I have a BA, played college football, and I have a background in that. But I went back to school a few years ago, actually with my mom, and pursued this. I had a lot of buddies that were bounty hunters and skip tracers, and they said you'd be great at recovery, but I wanted to take it a step further and become a private investigator. How did I get in contact with them? 98% of my clients are celebrities. I have a very special practice. In the state of Mississippi, I only work at 1 case at a time. I do not believe in charging an hourly rate. And a celebrity out in Los Angeles sent me a thing about Jonathan Estes, and it started sort as, look at this, you kind of look like this guy.
Yeah,
So
I was just
when
thinking that actually when I finally saw you, I was like, yeah, especially with his head shaved. I mean, you guys look pretty similar.
And for football, which I still play arena football, I cut my hair low, and you put a ball cap on, a cowboy hat on. He says, this guy looks like you.
Yeah.
But there was enough in this case where a celebrity who is a stuntman and an actor out in Los Angeles, who did have a residence in Louisiana, which is not far, said, you better take a look at this. Jonathan Estes' father is sort of a local celebrity. He is a preacher of sorts. Mm-hmm. He has a background in religion. So when he got in touch with me, he kind of fit what I do. Missing person, quite some time, a little bit meat on the bone. The cops seem to have come to a standstill or not doing anything with it, and he was able to take me on. I charged him a one-time fee, and I'm very upfront and honest with everything that I do. Charged him a one-time fee, so it's not like an attorney where a Q hours. And he's also a Vietnam vet. He was a war hero. A lot of people don't know that about Mr. Estes. We hit it off real well over the phone, but religion became part of this, and I'll explain that later. And that's how we got in contact. Within 2 weeks, he hired me, and I work on a case 24/7, one case at a time. Yeah. Law enforcement, when it comes to missing people, could have 50 cases. I have one, and I worked on it full time for about 4 months, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow. And if you've covered that many cases, you've been at this a while. How long have you been doing this type of work?
In the state of Mississippi, almost 2 years.
Okay. But outside of Mississippi?
About 2.5.
Okay. Gotcha. So you mentioned you worked on this case for about 4 months. I know your name and contact information came up in a few of the articles, and I also saw mention that there was a reward at one point that was being offered, I think, through your company, right? Is that actually put up by you guys, or is that put up by the family? How does that work?
100%. One of the things I look for, there's several big mistakes, not to filibuster or take up your show, but it's important that people understand this when you're dealing with private investigators. The first mistake people make is they put up a $2,000 reward. Right. A $3,000 reward, a $1,000 reward. Where's my son? He's been missing for 3 years. I got $5,000. If there was a murder, if there's somebody that could go away, or if you're going to rat out a family member, you got to have more than $2,000. Let me put it to you this way. I was at PetSmart the other day. There was a Chihuahua missing in the area. They had a $3,000 reward for it because it needed medicine. If your son has a $1,500 reward, nobody is going to blow the whistle on anybody. Yeah. And let me explain this. People say all the time, well, I don't have more than $2,000 or $3,000. So what my company will do is they'll come in and we automatically attach up to $25,000, sometimes 5 or 10, sometimes 15, 20, depending on what the reward is. That makes it look a lot more serious, and the media usually will put you on if you're offering 25 to 30,000, because if I'm on the news and I say we got a $1,000 reward for this, right? People will look, they won't catch it, but $50,000 reward for a missing girl from Mississippi State University. Next thing you know, people are turning the volume up on their televisions. Yep. So what we do is we come with a $25,000 backer, and I could go more if I want, up to 50. And I also have celebrities that I work with, local professional football players from the Mississippi area, from Mississippi State and Ole Miss, that are willing to back this. So if the news won't put it on, and let's face it, most people on the news are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white girls, college age or younger, that they want to cover. They do not want to cover a 220-pound African-American housewife. It doesn't get people to look at their television. They want that good-looking girl, that good-looking young kid, something that scares you a little bit. But you put $50,000 on it, and all of a sudden people are listing. Jonathan Estes kind of fell between the cracks. The family was offering very little money for this, and I said, let's put some money up. That'll get us press, and that's what led us to get the only first 2 articles that were ever in the regular media for this guy. Regular media, guys, is not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it is the newspaper, or it is a news station. So that's what I did. We put up a boatload of money, and that's where we started, and it started in Idaho, where his father had a church, and it went all the way down to Mississippi. So my blueprint and pattern starting this out was anywhere from Boise, Idaho to Mobile, Alabama. And that's the area that I was looking at. That was my blueprint when I started this. And yes, we put up the reward. Now, one other thing. A lot of people will say, well, I can't put up $5,000. What if somebody finds my son? Well, if somebody finds your son or your daughter and you put up $25,000, and you don't have it to pay, that's a pretty good problem to have. That doesn't mean you have to give it to them all in one sum in a paper sack. Sure. Pay it to them over a couple of months, a couple of weeks. Does that make sense? You see where I'm coming from? It's hard to explain that to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. So what happened? I know you're not currently officially working on the case. Why is that?
That's a great question, and it was one that I still technically don't have an answer to. I have a theory or two, and it's not money. I was paid up front, as I am with all clients. I charge a one-time fee, as I stated earlier, and I work on the case until completion. So I'm betting against myself. So if it takes 8 years, it takes 8 years. If it takes 8 days, it takes 8 days. Not everything as a private investigator that I look for is a person. Sometimes it's a vehicle. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a baseball player that was a famous pitcher named Bob Force for the Houston Astros and for the St. Louis Cardinals, and 16 years in the major leagues. He had a jersey that went missing after he died. His family couldn't find it. He only played 8 games or something for the Houston Astros. I found the jersey. That was very important to them. Doesn't sound the same as a missing person or a body. So not everything that I'm recovering is a person. Sometimes it's a vehicle of a missing person.
Right. So
to answer your question, I don't really have a definite answer as to why. I charged them an upfront fee. I thought I did tremendous on the case. 90% of everything that you see about this case was directly a cause of what I was able to uncover. The YouTube videos, the ability for the family to get into his social media, and I'll explain that a little bit later, and I want you to ask me about that later because that's very important in this case. I had an idea and proof as to what was going on with not only Jonathan Estes, but his ex-wife, who at the time, technically they were still married. They did not get divorced until after his disappearance, which is big because he couldn't show up to be divorced. You know, they served him in the paper. The newspaper. That's how they got the divorce to go through without him being there. I believe that what I uncovered embarrassed religiously and morally the family, not only with Jonathan Estes, but with Cindy, their lifestyle being a big thing about it. And I wanted to go public. I wanted more media. I wanted to get this story out there. I wanted more people to know exactly what was going on behind closed doors. And as soon as I was getting ready to go on a couple of drive time morning radio shows about this, which I thought was a great idea. The more people that know, the better. The family cut me off, and I didn't hear from anybody for 2 weeks. I called Mr. Estes back several times. I had been talking to his daughter, who is very, very good at this, but she does not have a background in this. She is not licensed in this in any state. She has a knowledge of what is going on, and she helped me quite a bit. Listen, you don't have to be a private investigator to uncover things. There was just a case a couple of days ago where somebody used Google Earth to find a vehicle that had been missing for 20 years. We see that all over the place. But this is not what you do full time. This is very difficult to do if you have a day job at UPS or you're a school teacher. So I believe the family did not want me to go public. I think I was a little bit too flashy. I think I was a little bit too hard-edged. And I think that some of the stuff I uncovered about Jonathan's lifestyle didn't make him look like a great guy that was missing. But whether he was a great guy, a moral guy, bottom line is he's still missing. And that's exactly what I wanted to get out there. And they totally cut me off. Now, in the last couple of months, I've had calls from other people that say they're private investigators or related with the family that want my information. And I say, well, have the family call me. I'll give you anything you want, but have the family call me. I don't know you. And that never happened. One of the biggest aspects in this, and this is very important, John, very, very important, is sometimes when these cases don't get solved and the family's frustrated, what's the first thing they say? The police are involved. Let me tell you something. The police are involved in this case, but they are not keeping this case from being solved. I dealt with everybody, including the chief of police, the sheriff, and the detective, Leslie Falvey. They were all extremely polite. They were forthcoming. They did everything I asked them to do, which they don't have to do. Hell, private investigators, as I told you earlier in the show, are not licensed. In the state of Mississippi, we're knuckleheads, right? They went and did different things for me in that area, and they asked and did everything I wanted them to do, and they gave me answers to everything I wanted. Now, did they do that to the family initially? No. They had 300 cases on their logs. He's one guy on the bottom of the pile who was 7-8 months and nothing. So the family was a little bit more obviously emotionally invested. When I got into the case, Leslie Falvey was the first person I talked to, and he couldn't have been more kind and polite and respectful of what I was trying to do. He wanted to help. And the family wanted to say that the cops were behind it. They know where the body is. They're not coming after the girl who might be involved in this. The ex-wife isn't being looked at. Was there some oversights by law enforcement? Sure, nobody's perfect. But law enforcement, ladies and gentlemen, and John, is the best in the world at what they do. Very, very, very rare that cops are behind this. Okay. So was there some police officers involved in this case? Former cops, 100%. I'll explain that to you. But was law enforcement behind this guy missing? No. Is it an easy out? Yes. And what do we see on every investigation Discovery Channel and every television show and YouTube video that any knucklehead wants to put out there? It makes it more interesting if the cops had something to do with it. So a lot of the stuff that you see out there is not the norm.
Yeah.
It's the minority of what happens. But it makes for better television, radio, and websites. The police are not involved in this kid's disappearance, and the family did not want to hear that.
I mean, I think I can easily understand. I mean, you're right. Those stories are already gravitating to the surface, and they're grabbing our attention. But when we are talking about small town politics, a lot of connectivity, everyone knows everyone. I think the risk of that is obviously larger than if you're talking metropolitan area, millions of people. The connectivity isn't quite there for that type of, if it is a conspiracy or whatever it is. But also I wanted to touch on something with Melissa, and I really appreciated the effort that I saw by her to raise exposure to the story, to get out there and do that. And you being a former football guy, I know you understand the power of a team. And I think that's really important. It's something I always try to drive with the channel is you're really trying to put a team together, and you have to have law enforcement be a part of that. If you've got a PI, they've got to be a part of that. Someone has to be the family point person. And sometimes one family member or a few will be kind of the media face. And to your point, you're trying to get the information out there, and you're trying to grab the attention so that the right tips can be called in or the right information can come your way and you can give out that reward. Sometimes, and we know that it's almost, there's this weird entertainment aspect. You know, if I'm reading an article and it's a private investigator talking about his investigation, that's one level of attention it's going to get. If it's a family member crying about their missing brother and how they're never going to stop working for him, that's a whole different level of attention. So I kind of get where there's benefits each way you go about it. That's why we present things like we do here on the channel, where, you know.
And these people are lucky to have you. And there was one small caveat in that. When I do this, okay, first of all, the best private investigators in the world are women. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to tell you why, in my experience. Ego. Guys have egos. It gets to be a pissing contest, okay, with law enforcement, with this guy, with that. And a lot of private investigators, as I stated before, some of them are former military or law enforcement. They have a little bit of an edge to them, and they're used to being in charge. Women make the best private investigators, especially for missing persons. I don't know why that is, but in my estimation, that's always been the case. I don't have an ego. I try to take that from female private investigators. Anybody who wants to call me and at any time has my cell phone number, I answer the phone 24 hours a day. I'll talk to anybody. I don't care if you're a psychic. I had them call me. I don't care who you think you are. I'll take your call. And I got a lot of calls on this case from all kinds of people, and they weren't just after the money. They wanted to be involved. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not entertainment. This is a family who has a son that's missing, probably deceased.
Right.
And people look at this stuff on the internet and they do a couple of Google searches and all of a sudden they think they're private investigators, and it's not how it works. So there was a caveat in this story where towards the end, and with the exception of this, the only time I am not forthcoming, and I have control of this, as I told Mr. Estes from the beginning, you're going to take your hand off the steering wheel and I'm going to be in charge of this. Now, I'm not saying that that is an ego thing, but you have to let me do what I'm trained to do. This is what I do. Every bit as much as if I was going to go ahead and operate on you and you looked at me and said, hey, Doc, here's how I want you to start the operation. No. You've been doing this for a year. You've been doing this for 9 months and you've gotten nowhere. You paid me good money to do it. Let me do my job. He wanted me there was a little bit of he's an ex-military. He's a war hero from Vietnam. There was a little bit of compatibility right there. There was some tension there towards the end, and he wanted to sort of take this over after I gave him information that he didn't have. All of a sudden, he had a little bit of runway, and he wanted to take off with it, and he wanted me to come into town and meet with some people. I didn't think that was a good idea, and that was the last time I had talked to him. They may think that that's part of the reason. He seemed to want to take this thing over and do it his way, where the way I was doing it was getting them further than they'd ever been before. And that might be something as well. So if you're going to hire somebody to do something and you don't want them to do it anymore, fire them.
Yeah.
But if you want them to work on the case, don't hijack it from them any more than if you went into a doctor's office. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So let's get into some of the details. And the first detail that I want to clear up here is Bogachito is actually, there's two in the state of Mississippi, which I didn't know until I put that video out, and everyone's letting me know, hey, John, you're talking about the wrong one. The one that we're actually referring to where this is going down is in Lincoln County. And that is considerably farther south than the one that I referred to in the last episode. So just to clear that up, and a big thank you to all the commenters that brought that up. We've already cleared up the tattoo information. What is the last known contact that actually happened with Jonathan? Is it the call to his friend? Is it him being picked up by the neighbor across the street? What's the very last point of contact we know was him?
Boy, depending on who you ask, you'll get a different answer. It's like snowflakes. Let me tell you what I found out. And this goes back to the moral issue of this story. Jonathan Estes had about 6 girlfriends at the time that he was married. Both couples were heavily involved in swinger websites, dating websites. That's a fact. I found that out. The family at the time that they hired me, nobody ever found the telephone right off the bat. It was later found. Nobody had a call log, credit card information. They did not have social media information. Nobody could get into any of his Facebook pages. As far as they knew, nobody knew what his last contact was, except that there had been some text messages to the sheriff's department, and I want to say there was a Detective Johnson, it was a black guy, there's 2 Johnsons, I believe, there, and he texted him. Now, I could text you right now, John, and it could be me or it could be Tiger Woods. That doesn't mean John did it. It means the person that had his phone did.
Right.
The last person to speak to Jonathan Estes was a girlfriend of his up in Wheeling, West Virginia. Now, while this was an issue, is on both sides, and you're going to find out that this is the same thing in the story all the way around. The girl that he was seeing in Wheeling, West Virginia, who looked like Cameron Diaz, beautiful girl. John had a lot of girlfriends, partner. Now, his marriage was crumbling. He was not living with her. She gets a bad rap for this, and I'm not sticking up for her, but looked like Cameron Diaz, but I looked her up, and everything pointed to her. I had found plane tickets that showed that she had flown to Texas to meet with him. He was an on-the-road construction worker, Pensacola area. They had seen each other for quite some time. I even had pictures of them in a gym together at a hotel that they spent time at. But she had been in a relationship for 5 years. Jonathan had been married. The last person to speak to Jonathan on the phone and hear his voice was this woman in West Virginia, who I spoke with several times and begged to call the police. She did not know she was the last person to speak with him and just figured he disappeared and went back to the guy she was with, who had no idea she had this relationship with Jonathan Estes. The problem with this woman is in her background, as I do a background check on everybody, it's part of what I do, she had a rap sheet. She was a former prostitute in the state of Florida. She was busted for prostitution in the state of Florida. I don't know if once a prostitute, always a prostitute like a governor, but she had that background. When I got a hold of her and was able to reach her, a guy answered the phone. And I says, Jesus, if Jonathan Estes is alive, this is him. He's in West Virginia. Nobody knows about this girl. He had 6 of these women. Well, the girl in West Virginia I spoke to, but her boyfriend answered the phone first. And I asked him, I says, is this Jonathan? He goes, who's Jonathan Estes? He goes, I've been with my girlfriend for 6 years. I says, has she ever been to Houston, Texas or to Pensacola? He said, no. I says, you sure your name's not Jonathan Estes? I says, if it is, I'm on my way up there. I know who you are now. He said, partner, I don't even know what you're talking about. My girlfriend and I have been together for 6 years. So she didn't want to go to the cops. She didn't want to say what she knew because she would lose the relationship and the person she was living with. She was cheating on him and he was cheating on his wife. You see where this is going?
Yeah.
Now, this is one of the things that family did not want out there, but it's what needs to be out there because it's the absolute truth. Last person to hear Jonathan Estes on the phone was one of his 6 girlfriends in West Virginia, who I believe works in the tech industry or in the tech industry and is a former prostitute who he had a very lengthy relationship with, an intimate relationship with. So what I did was we needed to find proof of this for other people. Well, Jonathan Estes' phone had been disconnected. Listen to me on this, John. This is interesting. And we had to find a way to get into his Facebook. We had to find a way to get into his Instagram, me and Melissa at this point, because I wanted her pulling the trigger. She was the family. I didn't want to break into something that would get me in trouble. So what I did was I says, has anybody called John's phone number? They said no. So we called the phone number and a 17-year-old kid answered who had just gotten the phone for his Christmas gift. Yeah. I asked to speak with his mom. His mom got on the phone. She knew the story and lived 3 blocks from these people. And I said, listen, all his Instagram, his Facebook, his YouTube channel, John, are all connected to this phone. The telephone company did not know that the phone belonged to a 17-year-old kid. I says, if we start breaking into these accounts, Melissa does, and they send you the passcode, will you give it to me? She says, I'll help any way I can. told Facebook to text a code to the phone, which Jonathan no longer had. It was not his number anymore. And now we were able to get into his YouTube account, his Facebook account, his Instagram account, even aspects of his credit card the family was able to. That's where you see the YouTube videos that are online. I was able to procure that. Now, I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but there were some things that I found in there that proved what I've been telling you about Jonathan Estes, the lengthy list of girlfriends. What was also on there was photographs that he took before he went missing of his ex-wife, Cindy, who, by the way, called me during this. I'm the only person she's ever reached out to and talked to, and I had an hour conversation with her, which was very interesting. So that's how this whole thing started. That's how the information that's out there got out there. And even though it wasn't what the family wanted to hear, it was the truth. The last person he talked to Jonathan Estes alive, and not on a text message, was one of his girlfriends in West Virginia. Okay. And the police have her information, and they've spoken to her. She's agreed that is true. And that was right around the second around noon.
Did I hear you mention that his phone was eventually found?
They found the phone, yes. His vehicle was found. The phone was in his vehicle. They never turned it over. I don't know where it is, but there was a telephone found. Now, whether or not it was the telephone, his last telephone, I never got that because all that stuff disappeared. Everything disappeared with Jonathan Estes. Right. The mobile home him and his family lived in, his bulldozers, his tools, his guns, everything of that man's was gone. And that's a big key in this.
Now, I did also hear that another private investigator was working for Jonathan looking into Cindy. Did you ever get to talk to this person, or did you see the report?
Yeah, God bless her. I had heard from several of his friends that he had hired a private investigator before he went missing. And John, just to tell you how close this thing was, I got calls from everybody. And you know why I got calls from everybody? Everybody loved Jonathan. You know why? Because they were all swinging with him and his ex-wife. So I get a phone call from a swinging couple, okay? And they say, hey, listen, Jonathan was an avid hunter. And they loved talking to me because I'm not law enforcement.
Yeah.
And they said, you know, he put a deer cam up in front of his house before he went missing, his trailer? I said, no. They said, yeah, we just went there and grabbed it. I said, what? A couple that he knew, and the police have this information as well, grabbed a deer cam that he put in front of his wife's house 4 weeks before he went missing. He turned it on several days before he went missing, and I've got that footage. The police have that footage. People have that footage. And you know what happens? Instead of taking photographs with a deer cam, he accidentally hit the video to record.
Right.
The last video of Jonathan Estes is him looking into a cam about 30 feet up in a deer cam in a tree that's pointing at his house, and he hits record.
Yeah.
The batteries died in about an hour, and 72 hours later, he's never seen again. Whatever happened in that house, if he would have hit photographs, we would know. He accidentally hit record, and the batteries in that deer cam died within hours, and so did any proof that deer cam would have held. People have that deer cam. The reason he put the deer cam up, John, is because he hired a private investigator to prove that his wife was cheating on him. And all anybody had to go on, because they could not get in his email addresses or his Facebook or his social media, was she's black, she's a female, and she's from Mississippi. And so what I did was that's all I had to go on. And I told you, in the state of Mississippi, we're not registered. There's a MPIA or something like that. There's some sort of a club that people can pay $35. If you're not from the state of Mississippi, they won't register you in this online private investigators association. It's horse if you want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Pay $35. They won't let me in it, so I'm a little bitter. I'd have paid the $35 just to say I was in it. So I couldn't even look at a database of that. I called around for days to find out who this woman was. Weeks later, I found a black woman who knew a black woman who might have been a private investigator. And I found her in Biloxi, Mississippi. She was hired through a national site which found her locally. The reason I was able to find her is once we had his cell phone number connected to that 17-year-old boy I talked about and his family, which I forget their names, and they were instrumental in this.
Yep.
We went into his Gmail account, and on one of his emails was the name of the company of the private investigators that he tried to hire. All she said was that cars came in and out of the house when he took his daughter on a field trip to Washington, D.C. She had no real information other than she told him to put that deer cam up. She was not licensed, really. She had no real background. She was a nice enough lady, but she was out of her league. And he was upset with her in the emails that I saw.
Okay.
And pretty much fired her. he still had a couple of hours left on the record to pay her, or she had a couple of hours on the books that she still could have worked for him. When I called her and finally got a hold of her, she didn't even know he was missing. She was hired to look at the wife and then found out he was missing and became very helpful, but had very little information other than she believed that ex-wife was cheating on him. Well, it took me 30 seconds to figure that out. So, yeah, I found that woman, and it was pretty much a dead end. But it was an avenue we had to scratch off the list, John.
Gotcha. Now, do you know if he was trying to prove that she was cheating on him? Was this in a play for his divorce proceedings or to try to get more custody? Okay.
Yes, and I'll tell you what the caveat here is, okay? He wanted to prove that she was cheating on him with law enforcement, cops, that she was dating, having extramarital affairs, not only with people. They knew that. They did it together.
Right.
But with local law enforcement, because he believed the reason that, let's not forget, when Jonathan Estes first disappeared, everybody, including law enforcement, thought he was on the run for rape.
Yeah.
Cindy Estes went down there and said, this guy raped me at gunpoint. He's gone. Well, that gave them days, anybody days to think that he was running. Jonathan Estes knew the police were after him. But one of the first things I did with law enforcement, they were very helpful, is to let everybody know that Jonathan Estes was not being tried, looked at, or there was no warrants out for his arrest for rape, for any of that.
Right.
Because I thought if he's out there and he's alive and he's in Idaho or he's living with this girl in West Virginia or Pensacola and it's in the newspaper, and the very first articles that state this, I'm in there, you can see it, state that he was not being looked at and not wanted for any crime. They got that out there pretty quick. Leslie Falvey did a good job. So did the chief of police and the sheriff there, who I thought were just phenomenal. And they got that out there that says if he walks out of the woods right now, he's not wanted for rape.
Right.
Nobody walked out of the woods.
Yep.
And nobody ever saw him. So I wanted to make sure they got that out, John.
One other clarifying point, one commenter, Calvina Ainsworth, asked, far as I know, you can't serve your own divorce papers. A third party does it. And she's talking about that night, essentially, when he went over there with the divorce papers. I did a little looking online. I found a website called CompleteCase.com. They said specifically in Mississippi, you don't have to use a third party to serve papers. If you and your spouse are on good terms, you could bring the papers to him or her and get a signed acknowledgement that the papers were received. But if you're not on good terms, then yes, obviously you can hire someone to do it, including law enforcement. So does that part of the story hold up? Do we know that he was taking papers over there the night of their big altercation?
I spoke with both sets of attorneys. He had gone in to speak with an attorney when he hired the private investigator, but never hired her. I also spoke with Cindy Estes' attorney, and I says, you call me. Now, Cindy Estes' attorney was for their divorce. It was not for any sort of a crime. In fact, if anything, Cindy Estes' attorney thought the crime was done on her. He could not handle me. Now, let me explain what this is. There was also something else missing, and it fails in comparison. But there was a piece of equipment missing called a bobcat, which I had to look up. Listen, I grew up on the beach in Clearwater, Florida. I've never done a day of construction in my life, but I learned more about construction than I ever thought. And John, there was a bobcat that was missing that belonged to Carl Estes.
Right.
And it was sold. It was advertised on Facebook, and there was proof that it was sold on Facebook. If anything, she is guilty of grand theft and of selling of stolen goods, and that happened. I was also looking for the bobcat as well. So there was other things here that were missing that we had to find out what had happened to. But as far as Jonathan Estes goes, and as far as that scenario there, we had to look at several different things. And she eventually ended up calling me because I was not only looking for Jonathan Estes, I was looking to get her in trouble. Right. Even if the rape case held up, let's say he raped her and she sold something of his, she still committed grand theft. If he raped her and she sold something that was his, then it's like a 15-yard penalty in football versus a holding penalty. You got a 15-yarder and a 10-yarder, they offset and they both get arrested. That's possible. I was trying to get her to have to go down to the police station and discuss where this guy was and why she sold everything of his. I do not believe that he raped her. In fact, we have some stuff on YouTube which shows that never happened, and that stuff is out there. The family helped me with that. Jonathan Estes was not a criminal. I don't believe he ever had a traffic ticket. Neither did Cindy Estes. These are not criminals. These were not people that had DUIs and bad checks and all kinds of stuff. These are people that were absolutely hard workers, and they never broke the law. And that made this even more difficult because you look for a pattern in this. So to answer some of the question here, I tried to get Cindy for the theft and the proof of that case. So there was two cases going on here, that she stole stolen property and that belonged to Jonathan Estes' father, Carl, and that maybe she had something to do with his disappearance or knows something. And that's when the flood of calls started coming in, both about their children, about the school, and about what possibly could have happened to this guy, which I think I have an answer to. The family just doesn't like it. Yeah,
and we'll definitely touch on that before the end of this video. Kathy Z asks, his ex hit him with a vehicle. Are they sure he wasn't killed and the ex had a friend get rid of the evidence? Just a thought. What can you tell us about the night of the altercation? You said Cindy has talked to you. Did you actually talk to her about that?
Great question. This is that caveat of about 24 to 48 hours where things weird. She admitted to me she hit him with the car. Here's what she said. Now, listen. I was in a parking lot one time. My brother was playing basketball with a few friends. I backed out and I nudged him. Did I hit him? Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, Britney Spears hit somebody with a car too one time and nobody was hurt and she drove away. Did she run him over? He went under the tires and it killed him? No. She nudged him. Here's what Cindy Estes, who called me, and I'm the only one she's ever called to this degree. She called me and she explained that. Because she said, after he raped me, I tried to get out of the house. I jumped in the car and I tried to drive away, and he tried to jump in front of the car. And when he jumped in front of the car, I nudged him. She admitted to me that she did that. Why I know for a fact, unequivocally, that she did not kill him with that vehicle is he lived in a duplex. He was renting a place within walking distance, a little bit of a hike, couple clicks down the road. But there was another girl that was in the duplex next to him. So two apartments, the only two on a big piece of property. And I talked to the lady that lived there. She saw him after that. Not only did she see him after that, she drove him around. He explained to her that the reason he ran back to his house and was in her home when the cops were looking for him, technically right next door, they were looking for him for possible rape, and he was next door in this duplex. He was on the property. He was in the structure. He was just next door. She admitted this to me. And I says, why, if a guy came to your back door and knocked on it and said, my ex-wife just tried to kill me with the car. She thinks I raped her. The cops are looking for me. Why the hell would you let him in your house? And you have children? And you know what she told me? We were sleeping together. I had a relationship with him. We're up to 2 women now, John. And both of them were having sex with him at the same time. And if you count his wife that night, that's 3. So she trusted him. She got him in a car. She admitted that she went through a police roadblock and they didn't know who he was. We said at the beginning of the show, John, that I look like the guy. You take my hat off, you put my hat on, I could be Jonathan Estes in the rain. The cops did not realize he was there. And I think she is a major, major, major piece in this, because when Jonathan's sister called this girl, and like I said, I'm open. I don't have an ego. I'll take help from anywhere. And I let her in on this. She gave her a totally different story. You do not have to believe me. You do not have to ask me anything that might trip me up or trick me. I'm telling you what my conversation with that woman was like. This is why they hired me. She told me she saw him and that she drove him around, and he explained the story about being run over. So if his next door neighbor knew about it, it wasn't in the newspapers, she heard it from him, which now pushes the timeline closer to when he disappeared.
Right.
She also had ties in Louisiana and Texas, and she had also had some issues with the landlord and does not live there anymore. When I called her and confronted her, she was living with her one of her children's fathers, who she had a relationship with. One more person, John, that can't come out because they're involved in some sort of a love triangle with Jonathan Estes.
And this is
so
what's
he was
important.
He was hit by the car, and then within hours he walked home.
This is an important aspect to this case because, like in the coverage that I did, we touched on the fact that they might have been seeing some other people, but we kept it really, really light. When you talk to someone that's actually dealing with this and looking into this case, all of a sudden you're opening these doors of other things that potentially could be going on here. And when you do have these love triangle type relationships, the other point of the triangle could be a potential suspect in terms of a violent act happening here, which is why I think I understand why the family is worried about this type of information coming out. But in terms of helping the case progress, really understanding all the possibilities and helping to get the right tips, I think you need the whole picture. So I really appreciate that you're telling us about that whole aspect.
Another aspect of this, John, which was difficult, is Miss Estes, Jonathan's mother, at the time, and Mr. Estes had been battling health issues. Mr. Estes was going through, I believe, prostate cancer at the time. It's widely known, so I'm not, breaking a HIPAA law. I'm not his doctor. Not only was he going through cancer treatments, not only was his son missing, not only was he a war vet from Vietnam, who, let's face it, those guys had it rough, and he was, I believe, infantry. He had a lot going on here. Yeah. And when he hired me, with my personality, see the way I talk, I'm always forward. You can tell I have a background in media. I'm not scared. I'm impossible to intimidate. And I'm not coming off or trying to come off as a tough guy, but this is what you need, and you need to press when you're looking for someone. This is a hurry up and wait business, but you have to be able to be the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And at times, if I could find Jonathan, if he was alive out there somewhere, which I don't go into this looking for a body. I go into this looking for evidence that he's alive. If he was alive and I found him and he was a bad guy, then we found him. Once again, another good problem to have. I don't care what the family thinks of me. I don't care what law enforcement thinks of me. I don't care what the community, Facebook, blogs, any of that stuff thinks of me. My job is to find out what happened to this guy, where he's at. Let me give you one other aspect here, John, and a lot of people don't know about this. Let's say Jonathan Estes left and was living in Seattle working at a car wash, or he's in San Diego or Miami, or he's up in Portland, Maine. And I find him, and this has happened before. And he says, listen, my parents are jackasses. I can't stand my ex-wife. I think she's going to kill me. I don't want them ever to find me. In some states, I'm not allowed to rat him out. This happened with a missing girl a while ago. That her family something happened. She disappeared, and the cops found her. And she went into law enforcement and said, I'm the missing girl. I don't want them to know where I am. I can get in trouble. If I found Jonathan Estes living in Dallas, Texas right now, and I went back and told the family that he's in Dallas and here's his address. So how do you show that you found him? You take a picture with him next to a newspaper. You go back to the family and say, listen, he wants nothing to do with you. Here's how this stuff usually goes with missing persons, John. I call him, I talk to him, and I say he could be alive living in Portland. He would never leave his family. He would never leave his children. His children meant so much to him. And I've even had people say he would never leave his dog. She would never leave her cats. People leave all the time, and it's not illegal. Yeah. You can leave. I could leave right now and never talk to my family again because I think my dad's an alcoholic or my mom was a child molester or whatever the case may be. And it doesn't mean that I've committed a crime. It just means I want nothing to do with you people. But people have a tough time thinking that happens. There's a couple of scenarios that could go on here that don't have to do with Jonathan Estes being dead, buried in a backyard somewhere, being in a silage pit, or, the cops killing him. Right. He could have just walked away from these people and met a girl that they didn't, let's face it, they didn't know any of these women existed until I got involved in this, and he could be living high off the hog somewhere in Virginia. That's a possibility. Does that make sense? Yeah. You're still open to that possibility? Very slim. Okay. There is 3 possibilities, and when you want to get into that, I will give you those in the percentage, but there is a high 90s probability to what happened here, and I believe I uncovered enough to figure that out. All right, well, let's drive a little bit into one of those theories. Without a doubt, Love commented, they probably need to search for his body near where his wife lives, my opinion. Sounds to me like she did something to him. Patty Willing also commented, does wife have brothers? I'd check her family members first. Thank you, John. So we know that they were living on a property in a mobile home, but other family members were living on the property as well, right? I told you earlier, everything in Jonathan Estes' life disappeared. Everything. His tractors, his guns, the mobile home that they lived in. And here's what I want the people to do. Look, I'm going to get in here. Okay, listen to me, John, okay? Because every person watching this program, which is fascinating and incredible, can figure this out in 30 seconds. There is a YouTube video of Jonathan Estes confronting his wife. You've seen it, correct? Yep. We found that on his cell phone. He made a 12-minute video, and with all due respect to everybody involved, the double-wide trailer that she was living in, he was living down the street, he had been repairing it because she was such a slob, was nasty. piles of dishes, clothes everywhere, filthy stuff as far as the eye can see in a 12-minute video days before he went missing. One of the things I wanted to find, and what I'm very good at finding, is things that are missing.
Yeah.
Nobody knew where that mobile home went. She sold it like she did so many of his other things. I ended up finding – that's a dog in the background. I apologize. I ended up finding the mobile home. It was in the middle of nowhere, and this is going to make your toes curl. I found the mobile home. It was not easy to find a mobile home, and there was a woman living in it in her mid-20s. She was an actress from Louisiana, and the industry in Louisiana where they film a lot of movies had dried up. She was out of work, but she bought the mobile home, or somebody did. Long story short, the guy that bought the mobile home with her moved it in the middle of nowhere. We found the mobile home, and I found a phone number on the girl. It took her days to get back to me. She wouldn't get back to me. Finally, her boyfriend, who she had a child with, got back to me. And he said, "Why are you calling? Did my wife hire you?" I says, "Who's your wife?" I says, "I'm a private investigator, and I'm looking for a missing person. Why would your wife call me?" And he goes, "Oh, shit." He goes, "This isn't about me cheating on my wife, is it?" And I says, "No, you're cheating on your wife." He says, "The woman that bought this mobile home and I have a child together. I've been married for 15 years or so. My wife does not know I have a child with this woman, and I bought the mobile home and moved it into the middle of nowhere. He thought I was hired by the wife." I said, "No, the guy that owned that place with his wife went missing. Put her on the phone, or I'm calling your wife."
Yeah. Yeah.
So he got her on the phone, and she was scared to death. And I says, "You tell me anything. I don't care how crazy it sounds about that mobile home when you bought it." She says, "I met Cindy. She was extremely nervous. She didn't know how to act, and the place was deplorable. So I know she was in there right before it was sold. Food still in the cupboards, dishes still in the sink." Now, a double wide is together. They split it, go side by side, and that's how they usually transport it.
Right.
So the house was split and transported to this property. They bought the house for next to nothing. I says, "Tell me something I don't know about this house. I know it's filthy. I've seen the YouTube video, so I know this girl isn't, BSing me. She's not blowing smoke." She says, "Everything in this home was extremely filthy, except one room." Want to take a guess as to what room that was, John?
Bathroom.
Master bathroom.
Yeah.
She says, and her words were, "It looked like somebody cleaned the master bathroom with a toothbrush."
Wow.
And if you want my idea as to what happened here, that's important to remember. So a mobile home gets moved and is sold by Cindy Estes. She did not have to move. It was there for years. It's completely filthy. You can see it in the YouTube video. It stayed that way until she moved out. It was never cleaned. It was sold for next to nothing, moved into the middle of nowhere, and the only thing in that place that was spotless, absolutely spotless, was the master bathroom. Now, you tell me why that is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really strange. Going down that theory, but rewinding a little bit, when it was on the property, I think I heard that her father lived on the property as well.
Father owned the property. That's another thing. When I talked to her on the phone and she called me, I says, "I'll tell you what, Cindy, listen," and I do this with everybody. "Cindy, I don't believe you killed anybody. I don't think that you buried this guy somewhere. I don't think anything ill, just so I can cross it off the list, Cindy. Just so that we can get you out of this family's mind. Hey, listen, and you see this in TV shows all the time. Cindy, Carl Estes is a nut job. The sister's out of control. They don't like you. Let me scratch you off the list so we never have to bother you again. Let me come on the property and search. By the way, we found a deer camp. But no, that's okay. Let me come on the property and search." All of a sudden, the excuses started to fly. "Well, we own 141 acres. And you can only search this much of the property because this guy owns it. And then you're going to have to ask this person, and I'm not letting you on the property." So I called her attorney, like I stated earlier. And I says, "I'll tell you what, she's got nothing to hide. Let me come on the property. I'm looking for a bulldozer. I'm looking for a bobcat. I'm not looking for a body. If that bobcat isn't there," which, by the way, it's on Google Earth. There's photos of it. I says, "And it's not on that property." And her attorney says, "If you come on that property, we'll get you for trespassing. You're not allowed on that property." Her children, Cindy and Jonathan's children, who were moved to a new school within weeks of after his disappearance, were going around school telling other children, "Daddy's buried in the backyard." I said, "Cindy, this is going on. Let me come over there and help you. I'm going to make sure that people don't think you're involved in this anymore." Boy, did she blow a gasket. She would not let me on that property.
Wow.
And it wasn't until a couple of months later I was able to get those dogs up there to search for decomposition, which is not an easy thing to do and very expensive and time consuming. And the police department helped me with that. I got them the dogs. I believe they've been back up there since, and the dogs did hit.
They hit on something on the property?
Yeah, sure. You want to know what?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the mobile home was gone. So all that was left was a big piece of property. Now, you asked me if her father lived on the property. Her father owned it. Uncle owned some property. That family owns over 300 acres in that state. The father lives on a piece of property that's another 250 acres, which nobody's been able to go on. If you don't know how big 250 acres is, it's a couple of sizes of where they play the Super Bowl, including the parking lots. So good luck. And we're talking about dense marsh and swamp in Mississippi. So, it's not, this isn't, like television. You could use drones, but, so, and excuse me, I lost my train of thought because I was you could see on my mind, and you could see how animated I am. I really believe. So as far as what was left on the property, there was a cousin that was on the property. Okay. And there was a couple of different people that lived on the property that were related to the family. The father did not live on the property, but he owned it.
But there was other family members living
there. There was a cousin named Steve, I believe, that was on the property. I talked to him. He told me he hated his fourth cousin. Now, in Mississippi, in New York and Ohio, you have a cousin. It's your dad's sister or brother's kid. In Mississippi, it could be your dad's sister's brother who shops at a convenience store, and his kin is related to you. People go 5 and 6 deep on cousins. Some sort of a cousin on that property lived there, and told me that a white Ford F-250 pickup truck was there when they moved that Bobcat out of there. Cindy also told me that was the case. He hated his cousin and ratted it out. He says, they won't even let me go on the property, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I go hunting for quail and this kind of junk, and I'm going to go on that property, and if I see anything, I'll call you back. He never called me again. He disappeared, and I think the family got to him. On that property, the only thing left from that mobile home, John, was a deck and some piping. When I got that lady out there, there was 2 places, that those dogs had any sort of activity. One was in a silage pit. Do you know what a silage pit is?
No.
A silage pit is sort of like an underground silo. It's where people store, I guess, grains and stuff like that. Listen, living on a beach in Clearwater, we don't have too many silos. Sure. But they use that to dump trash for years. Okay. That's behind the house. It was barricaded. They hit in there. Now people are going to say, well, they hit in there because there was a lot of decomposition because that family went deer hunting and coon hunting, and they threw all these dogs are looking for human decomposition. They are not looking for animal decomposition. These dogs walked over dead carcasses and antlers of deer and turkey bones and everything else and hit in the silage pit. But you know where they really hit? On that deck. You know why they hit on the deck? Because the deck had the piping next to it that was never removed. And you know what the piping was connected to? The bathroom. Yeah. There you go. I started wrapping this thing up, and I started putting it together, and this isn't law enforcement. This is an idea. Now you could kind of see where this thing is going. I haven't told you what I thought or what I think happened to him or whether he's alive or dead. But what I've told you and everything that I've told you is 100% factual, and I can back up 100%. Draw your own conclusion. Now we're starting to put this together. I don't think this guy is in Dallas working on a roadside crew for cash under the table. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I think, and you know what? I begged law enforcement. This is the only thing the family never did. And I begged him. I says, do this. I says, I want you to hire, and you and I talked about this off air when we did our meeting before this radio show. And I want to thank you again for what you do, because you're an incredible radio talent, and this kind of stuff needs to be out there more. In fact, you need to have a network show. But let me put it to you this way. When you deal with this kind of stuff, and when you're dealing with high emotion, okay, and people hit on stuff like this, and you tell the family, listen, here's what I think happened. And it's a conclusion that they don't want to hear. Yeah. Sometimes they don't want anything more to do with you. But what I begged the family to do, and I told them, just do it for me. And I'll tell you what, if I'm not writing this, I'll refund what you've paid me 100%, and you'll never hear from me again. I want you to go to that mobile home. We all know where it is. I want you to take a crew. And you and I talked about it. What can they do to test for blood in that bathroom, John?
Luminol.
Get a crew, independently hire them. and go in there. The girl gave me permission and do that bathroom. If you find that stuff could be in there for up to 20 years.
Yeah.
And somebody says, okay, well, what if she cut her legs shaven, or what if she, was on her period, but any of this stuff
Test
in that,
it. Yeah.
It wouldn't be blood droplets. It would be splatters. It would be large amounts of blood. Now, would it incriminate somebody? No, but if there's large shots of blood all over that bathroom, you're going to ask the person that last owned that house what the hell's going on. Nobody, including law enforcement, has taken me up on that. Nobody. Yeah. I don't know that anybody's been to that home. And to me, that was it. And that scared the hell out of that young girl living there, who once again is another person in a love triangle, not involved with Jonathan Estes, but involved with her baby's dad and his ex-wife or his current wife or whatever, that didn't want to come forward to the cops, because if she does, people are going to find out she's got a kid with a married man. See how nasty this is in Mississippi? It's not all black and white.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found any traces of like life insurance policies for Jonathan or anything like that? Or if this is the case, do you think the motive is strictly getting through this separation? She didn't want to deal with him in terms of child custody issues. What do you think the motive is?
I'm going to answer it this way. Okay. No, there was no money. She was going to lose those kids. She might tell everybody she was divorcing him first. We've got a YouTube video. I have a private investigator I found. I have a deer cam that he used. He was done with her 100% and was ready to move on. She was not going to let him have those kids. She was not going to let him have those kids. And I'll tell you this, and if Cindy's listening, if anybody with that family's listening, and they can debate me on this, they could come on this show and talk to me about it, she was going to lose those kids, John. I have enough on her that they would have never have given her custody of those children. The I saw, the things that I saw her say and do on social media and on these websites, there is no way in the world he would have not gotten at least partial custody, if not full custody.
Wow.
That's not even debatable. And she has an attorney out there if he wants to come on your show and talk to me about it. But I can prove what I'm saying. She was going to lose those kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's worth noting. If there is anyone else that wants to join in on a conversation about this, please reach out to me. You can email me, john@lordenarts.com, and we will absolutely put it together. Because I know the first episode, we kind of covered media's version of the story. Now we're hearing from a PI and his work and his opinion about what that work is leading to. I know there's other opinions and other avenues out there. And Michelle also, offer is completely open to you. If there's things that you want to come on here, refute about this conversation or add more clarity to, we're really just trying to get the best information out there so we can elicit the right tips and close this case. So I think we've kind of nailed it, but do you think law enforcement is still actively working on this case?
I know they are. I talked to the sheriff. We're in a culture now where murder shows are entertainment. Missing persons are entertainment. They're on radio. They're on television. I can't wait to sit in front of my television and find out how this murder show ended. There is people whose lives are destroyed. Yep. There's people who will never be the same. There's people who can never live another day the same after stuff like this. But we sit back with popcorn and we watch it, just like we do a running back jumping over a pile. Mm-hmm. The problem is a lot of these people think since they watch these investigation discovery shows that they know what to look for, they know how to look for it, and they can do better than a person that's trained in this. I went to college for this, okay? It doesn't make me a know-it-all. There is a lot of people a lot better at this than what I do. But I have pretty good success, and I never stop trying. I will never, ever, ever stop trying, and I'm 100% honest. And unfortunately, that got me in a little bit of trouble here, maybe with the family. But what happens is people look at that and they say, you know what? I can do what he does. I can figure it out. And they try to take over a situation like this, and it bogs down. If Melissa Estes and her family want to talk to me, I will always help them. My number is still the same. Anybody involved in this can call me, and I'll point them to the right direction. But I can wrap this up in a nutshell as to what I believe happened to this kid. If you want me to, I'll tell you here on the program. If you don't, that's your call. No. I don't know how much more time you got. But if the Estes family, they're good people, but I don't think they're going to come to a conclusion with this the way that they're doing it. And I think the way that they're doing it is just prolonging the inevitable. If this guy wanted to be found and was alive out there, he'd have came out the other day. And there's 3 possibilities that I've discovered that could have happened to him.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. There's a 5% chance that he disappeared and he never wants to see these people again. He's drinking tequilas and he's living in Mexico somewhere, in Toronto or somewhere on the West Coast. You're never going to hear from him again. He didn't want anything to do with his family. And he found some new girl like he had found many other times, and he is better off where he's at and not wanting to deal with anything that has to deal with that family ever again, and he's gone. He is a guy that can work under the table. That's a 5% chance.
Okay.
There's another possibility. His wife accuses him of rape. He talks to a couple of people. He can't handle this anymore. He's an avid hunter. We don't know where his guns are. We don't know where anything is. He takes a couple of mile walk into the woods, blows his head off.
Yeah.
They haven't found the body yet.
Okay.
Cindy didn't kill him. Nobody killed him. He killed himself, and that body's out there somewhere. And let me tell you something. Sooner or later in Mississippi, somebody will find it. That's another 5%. There is a 90% possibility that this is what happened, and this is what I believe happened. I believe Cindy and him were going at it. You could see it on the YouTube videos that I uncovered for the family. This was going on for a long time. She had moved on with a new boyfriend, a guy named Coleman. They had been dating. I had talked to him. He's scared to death of me. So was his family. They're related to everybody in Mississippi as well. She had moved on. She thought she'd lose the kids. She didn't want to be exposed as to what she was doing privately. Some of the stuff I've exposed here, which is now all out there. Everybody knows about it. And I think what happened is he went over to that house. He was fixing that trailer. He was still helping his children. He was taking videos. He was still taking them to events. And he went over there one night. I think they had sex. I think she said, you know what? I'm sick of this. I set it up. You raped me. He says, what? They got into a fight. Maybe they got into an argument after they had sex, but I believe they had intercourse that night. And I think there was an argument. She tried to run him over with the car. He got away. He went back and he saw the girl that lived next to him. You see, we're going to tie this all together. She puts out a thing for his arrest. The days after she put out the possibility of being raped, I don't believe I don't know anything about a rape kit. People are going to ask about all that. The police have all that.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours of her saying her husband and her swinging partner and the guy that was fixing her floors raped her at gunpoint, she was at an amusement park. She took the kids out of town. She dropped them off at his parents' house. She was living the life of Riley within 48 hours. Hey, listen, somebody rapes somebody. Usually they don't go to an amusement park or to restaurants or something the next day. She was doing all that stuff. She got out of town. He went next door, cooled off for a day or two, and said, oh, by the way, I got to go get my truck. I'm getting out of here. He went back to go get his truck. And right before he did that, he texted law enforcement and said, am I in trouble? We're looking for you, John. We need to see you. Okay, I'm going to come in. He goes back to that property because he didn't want to be picked up by the cops to either get his truck and run or to get his truck and turn himself in. Police have text messages that say he was going to turn himself in. He goes back to that house, and they're waiting on him. Don't ask me who. I don't know. And they killed that kid. And they put him in the bathtub. Okay?
Yeah.
Then after they had him in the bathtub, they moved his body again for a few days because the kids were on their way home. They put that body in the silage pit. Now we got both places that those dogs have hit. Those dogs are smarter and got better sense than I do. And what they did at that point is they got rid of the body. I'm not telling you who. I don't know who. Somebody did. You could draw your own conclusions. They got rid of that body. That kid's dead and that body's gone. That's a 90% chance of what happened. They found the car months later or weeks later behind the house, and everybody's got a theory. One of the things about this that we haven't talked about is an aspect of this that creeps me out to this day. And I mentioned this earlier in your show, and then I'm done, is that those children, Jonathan Estes' 2 kids, went to school and told their friends whose parents were friends with Jonathan. Said, Dad's buried in the backyard. The little boy said that. I called the principal of that school a week before they got off for Christmas. On Monday, she said she would call Leslie Falvey and the detectives, and they would get somebody down there right away. Within 48 hours, the grandparents came down there and met with the principal and the superintendent of schools. I called the school like if you knew a kid was being molested, and I said, hey, listen, these kids, I'm a private investigator. These kids are going in front of everybody, and they're saying Dad's buried in the backyard. Help me. Get those kids taken away. Do not alert the family. She goes, well, she never really mentioned that the kid's father was missing, and they got here a week before school started, and she has not been to any functions. They've kind of been under the radar. We wonder why they moved schools without the father's knowledge. The father's missing. Now the whole school knows. Yeah. On Tuesday, she said Leslie Falvey's going to come in, but he was at a meeting in Jackson, Mississippi. Wednesday comes. Now, the kids have a 2-week break for Christmas. Wednesday comes. I can't get the principal on the phone. At this point, she's already met with the grandparents and told them, go home. The cops are going to handle this. No social worker ever showed up to the school up till Wednesday. Thursday, I call her and I says, hey, where have you been? It's Thursday. The kids have not been pulled out. The grandparents drove 5 hours each direction to be down there. One of them's got cancer. We're not joking with you here. When are you going to pull these kids out of school? It's Thursday. And you know what her answer to me was? We had so much going on this weekend. We've had cookie parties. We've had there was a couple of kids got in a fist fight at school. We've had some issues here. We didn't get a chance to pull the kids out of school. I find out she's related to Leslie Falvey. They're related. Now, does that mean the cops are in on it, or is that just more of the same kin being related to the same people? Friday comes, and the kids are pulled out of school at 9 o'clock. Somebody told the mother that they were going to be questioned. And then they weren't questioned for almost a month. So the principal of those kids' school knew on Monday, the week before Christmas break, that a private investigator, law enforcement, and the grandparents of those kids were interested in what those kids were saying, and a bunch of friends and parents of that school were willing to come in. They never interviewed any of them. They never interviewed me. They never interviewed anybody, including the kids, until it was too late, almost a month later. Now, you let me know, is that just people screwing up, or is somebody involved in it? So now you could see why people would say the cops are in on it. Sure. But to me, that was a spot where we could have had those kids say something. And by the way, the dogs did hit on that silage pit in the backyard. Is it possible the body was moved during Christmas break? Very possible. But I do not believe Jonathan Estes is walking this earth today, and I think it's a shame because the family are good people. He seemed like a great enough guy, and it's unfortunate that it shattered so many lives, John.
Yeah. There's one thing to your theory that just kind of got stuck in my head, and that would be if he went back to get his truck, someone had to take him because he didn't have.
John, I'm waiting for that one.
Yeah. So what you got?
The girl that was next to him admitted to taking him there. If you listen to what I said earlier, she made it through a police roadblock.
Oh, that's when she got through it. Okay.
Yeah, she took him back over there and dropped him off. So she even saw something. At worst case scenario, she might be the last person to physically see him alive that doesn't have something to do with his disappearance. Do you follow me?
Yeah. Yeah.
She admitted that to me. Then the next day when the chief of police called her, she told him that wasn't true. You may not believe me. The family may not believe me, but I believe me, and I know what she told me. And that's exactly what happened. She moved out of that place within weeks.
In Mississippi, is that a two-party state for recordings? Do you have to have both parties agree to recordings?
It depends. Audio and video are different, but I'm gonna answer the question, and people are gonna nail me on this. No, state of Ohio isn't. In the state of Florida, you can, since cell phones did not exist when they started this rule in the state of Florida, you can put your cell phone on and record somebody, and because it's a phone, it's not considered a recording device. Oh. So there's loopholes in all this. Okay. In the state of Ohio, and I'm actually working on a case right now, in the state of Ohio, you do not – it's only a one-party state. So that is a really tricky question. But let me tell you something. If I recorded any of these people and, all you got to do is tell them you are recording them. But if I did record some of these people or if I did record some of them, it's more as to whether or not it's admissible in a court as to it being illegal. You see people in Walmart all the time fighting with people. They said, right. I didn't give you my permission. If you're in a public place or if it's not going to be admissible to court, let's say you and I are neighbors and we get into it and I'm filming you and we get into a fist fight and I upload it to YouTube, that's not illegal. Right. I can't come into your home and do that. But if I upload it now, if I need to use it for court, there's some lawyers that'll pick that apart. What makes you ask that question, John?
Well, I was just wondering about the conversation. I mean, if you have her telling you one thing, but then she talks to authorities and she's saying something else, I'm just wondering if you've got tape to back up your version.
At that point, she called me back. And I had my cell phone. I did not record that call. And she was so forthright and so nice and so devastated by what happened to this kid. Yeah. I didn't think I'd have any problem with her. Yeah. Until she found out that her boyfriend and baby daddy, who she was looking to get a relationship back with, who she was seeing at the time, might find out if she comes forward. A lot of these people just don't want to come forward because they don't want to screw up the relationships that they're in. She was the person I believe drove him over there.
Gotcha. So what do you think is the best next step to crack this case? What is the link in the chain? Search the
Go
mobile
search
home.
that mobile home. Anybody who came out, and I put my money up, there was almost $30,000 put up. Anybody who would have come forward would have already. $30,000 might not be enough to people who have money to sell out their grandmother, their uncle, their dad, their best friend, their brother.
Yeah.
Or they just don't want to get involved. So I don't think anybody now, could somebody weeks from now, months from now, years from now come out with something? Yeah, definitely. And maybe it will take Cindy breaking up with her current boyfriend for someone to come out. You see these things on television if people watch this stuff and in real life all the time. It's usually an ex.
Yeah, relationship change.
One of Cindy's children told people at school and kids that Mom and I watch a lot of these shows. And if she ever wanted to make somebody disappear, and I get goosebumps talking about it, she knows how to do it. That child, that was one of the things I told the principal. I says, that child watches these programs with her mom and has heard her mom say it would not be easy to do. So people want to brag about this. Some people want to get caught.
Yeah.
And some people want to think that they're smarter than everybody. If Cindy Estes was innocent, she never would have called me. She was scared. She wanted to feel me out.
If there are people that want to talk to you, now, let me just say, if you have tips, use the contact details that are in the description box below. We've been very clear you're not working the case. However, you're obviously very emotionally invested in this case. If people have some information that they want to give to you specifically, how can they do that?
Well, listen, I'm very easy to get a hold of. And my telephone number, and I'll give it out here on the program if that's okay with you,
Sure.
Is simple. It's 813-993-2242. 813-993-2242. If you don't feel comfortable talking to anybody, you want to talk to me about anything, you can. Do not call me and bullshit with me about the case. I do not want to hear your theories. But if you have an actual tip, you need to call law enforcement. You need to call the numbers that are on the Facebook. You need to call a legitimate media source. You do not need to be calling me. I've given you everything I've got right here. And the bottom line is that the police need to know as much as they possibly can. There's anonymous tip lines. You don't have to be worried about getting in trouble. The cops are not in on this based as to what I've seen. And I would go on record, and I have on this show and other shows. The sheriff showed up at the most recent gathering that they had for Jonathan Estes and answered questions. They're not hiding from anybody. And he's a good person. They're good sheriff. He's a good sheriff, and they got a good law enforcement there. People go missing, and oftentimes they don't find them. But what I'm telling you is if you have an idea as to what happened, you can give law enforcement a call. Or if you know something, I'll get you to the right person. 813-993-2242. John, you can give my number and my information. I own Gulf Coast Investigation based out of Biloxi, Mississippi. I would desperately encourage anybody who might be able to help this family to go in that direction. And if you have a loved one or anything missing out there, I'm a recovery guy. I'm very good at what I do. I'm not coming on here for plugs or to solicit, but I'm passionate about what I do, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And if you know this case, you'll have an idea. I can help you. I only handle one case at a time. I'm very affordable, no hourly rate. I'm the only private investigator in the state of Mississippi who I know does not charge an hourly rate. I'll help you. I do not do cheating housewives or bodyguard work, but what I can do is help find things that are missing, and I can help them as well. 813-993-2242. That's my cell phone number. You'll get me 24 hours a day. I'm always awake.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all the information you shared with us today, James. Really appreciate that. Sit tight, and I'll be right back with you just as soon as I'm done with the outro here.
Thank you.
That's it, everyone. A lot of information my brain is still spinning on. And of course, James feels very strong about one particular outcome that we're all looking at here. And it's hard to not feel strong about that when you hear the information that he shared with us. But let's continue the conversation in the comments down below. And just another reminder, I've got all the contact information that you need in the description box below, link to the original episode, link to numerous sources. So if you want to dive into this case more, you can do that. Thank you so much for your time here today. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here on Friday with a brand new episode of Brainscratch on the Lord and Arts channel.